So when I was probably 4 or 5, I'm guessing, no, probably 3 or 4. I was really small. Just a little kid, and I have a bunch of siblings. There's toys all over the place all the time. We had a toy bus that was pretty long. I don't know how to describe it other than that. It's probably a couple feet long, and it's plastic toy bus that I was small enough that I would kind of lay down on it on the wooden floor. I would lay down on it on my stomach and push myself around and just kind of cruise around the house, which is fine. That was awesome until one day I actually, like, there's these little grates in the house. You know how, like, in the house there's heater vents with little holes in them? This was a little bit of an older house, so the separation between those grates was a bit bigger, wider. So one day I'm cruising on the bus, and the front of the bus hits the grate, veers downward, and I hit it head on and cut my tongue almost completely in half. It was hanging by just like a tiny little thread. And honestly, I remember the pain and the trauma. I don't remember very well it actually happening. I don't have that picture in my head. I do remember just like the pain and the trauma and everyone freaking out about it. But yeah, I went head first, sliced my face against the grate, and cut my tongue almost completely in half. I was hanging by a little bit. And that wasn't cool. Like, that was terrible. But what was awesome for me, what I remember more than the tragedy and the pain, was being a little bit of a celebrity for the next 2 to 3 weeks, because they went and we had to do stitches at the hospital. Those stitches that dissolve themselves eventually, they put in my mouth. And so I had a tongue that was sewed back together, and I didn't get to eat anything except for awesome, delicious, soft food like pudding, ice cream, all kinds of sugar, soft, delicious stuff for 2 or 3 weeks. And I thought that was the best thing, and everyone was asking me about it. So that was kind of my 2 to 3 weeks of fame, and it was pretty bad. And so I just joke about it now. That's the reason I'm a pretty picky eater in a lot of ways, and I say that's why is because my tongue, it just got sliced right in half. Probably messed up the taste buds or something. But so just kind of give a little bit of a background on me and who I am, my family life. I'm one of 8 children, so I have 7 siblings. I have 5 brothers, 2 sisters, and I fall in number 4, so I'm right in the middle of 8 kids. And it's pretty interesting because with 5 boys plus me, 6 boys out of 8 kids, the girls kind of get like everything that we do ends up being really male oriented. So like we watch movies, it was always Star Wars or something violent, something that boys would like, I guess, more than girls. We felt kind of bad about that now, but we didn't then. Everything we did was just a lot of fun and usually very rough. So with so many brothers, we like to roughhouse a lot, wrestle, kind of push each other around. Yeah, just kind of show each other who's boss kind of thing. And we're better at that now, but we also are very close in that it's kind of interesting. With 7 siblings, you have friends outside of your home and family, like you have friends at school and stuff, but I don't know that you necessarily have to spend as much time with them because there's just kids all around you anyway. So a lot of, like, I could say that my siblings are my greatest friends. Just because we spent so much time with them, we didn't really need to go outside of the home a ton. And if we did have friends, yeah, they were usually friends with all of us. It wasn't like my older brother would have friends that they wouldn't want to hang out with us or whatever. So it's an interesting dynamic with so many kids. I like it. But I realized that, like, growing up, kids would always, like, hang out at each other's houses, want to go over. They'd invite us sometimes. And sometimes I would go and I'd have fun, but it was almost kind of weird because I thought, well, I'm already busy doing stuff, hanging out, playing, having fun with everyone here. So we're pretty tight in that way. And then also, we love to talk, in case you didn't notice. we love to talk, and we talk for hours. When we get together, we can talk forever. And not just remembering. I don't know, we don't usually just sit there and think back and remember the past. We also talk about, like, really complex issues. So if that's politics or religion or our opinions, we'll have debates. It's almost like debating with certain of my siblings. We'll just come and debate. And even if one person is totally wrong or they don't even think what they're debating, we'll debate for hours just to win. So lots of siblings, really tight family unit. We have a lot of fun. It's pretty competitive, and just fun. We all know that we love each other and that there's a safe place to go if we need any help. So I enjoy having a big family. I hope to have a fairly big family. I don't know about 8 kids. I always wanted 8 kids, probably because that's what I was used to. I don't think 8 now, probably, but 4 or 5, 3, 4 or 5, something like that. Multiple, just so we can have a lot of fun, I guess, the way that I have. So this story is going to sound kind of weird, probably. When I was a kid, about 4 or 5 years old, because it was before I started school, maybe at the beginning of when I started school, I, for some reason, I don't know if I was traumatized or something, and this was my way of expressing that or whatever. I don't think so. It's just really random. I came up with my own language, and I know that sounds like, oh, well, lots of kids speak gibberish and come up with their own language for a day or two or whatever, but I really did. And I think me and my siblings, we talk about it, think back on it now, and to me it's bizarre because it was extremely elaborate and like really well thought out, and I legit had a language that I created and that I would speak in. So like, I don't know how I came up with it, but the main word or the main phrase was chipiazamaka, which I don't know what that means now. I kind of like, it had multiple meanings probably, but they would ask me, okay, all right, well, if you have your own language, then say this, translate this. And I would come up with a response that was different each time that I could remember. So it wasn't just random, it wasn't arbitrary. I would come up with translations and words and things for it. And it was just gibberish, but the gibberish, I memorized it, and I could retain it, and I could repeat it if they asked me, months later. So it was bizarre. I wrote in my language. I came up with like songs. I wrote a song, the Chipiazamaka song, that had several verses, something like 60, 70 verses, all of which I knew and remembered and could sing back, recite back, word for word. I don't know how. I think that's kind of weird now. Kind of scares me a little bit. I don't know what happened to my mental capacity to be able to do that, because that seems pretty cool now. But that's the bizarre thing that I think back on it now, was that maybe it was random when I made it up, but for whatever reason, I could remember it and just come back verbatim, word for word, months later when they asked me about it. So that was interesting. I don't remember the language now other than little things like Chipiazamaka, but my siblings definitely do, and they know that it was different each time, or that it was the same each time, rather, when they would ask me things, and that I could just translate into that language. I don't know what happened to it. Wish I'd written it down more, but I did. We do have some documents where I've written it down, and I wish I knew the basis for that language now. But it is interesting because I served a mission. I learned Spanish to do that because I served in Mexico. And Spanish, I feel, in my case, was it's a fairly easy language to learn. It's probably the simplest of second languages to learn, so that was awesome. But I do love language and the intricacy of language and nuance within both English and Spanish, and however much I know of other languages. I love language. I'm fascinated with words and just how tiny little differences can change or shade meaning in different ways. So I do love that, and maybe that comes from my my origins as a language maker, as a creator of language. But I definitely don't know it anymore. So as far as my history goes in the world of music, I currently participate in choirs, and I love choir and music and singing, pretty much vocal. I love being a vocal artist, I guess. I'm not much of a soloist, but I form part of small groups, and I always love singing in choir. I love music. But that started, I think, because in school they try to put you into one of the areas of music, either band or choir or orchestra or something. They want you to have a little niche. They want you to be in something. So in 3rd grade, they kind of forced us to choose either band or choir and to pick an instrument, learn how to play it, kind of thing. And so I chose the instrument that I thought would be cool. I don't know why, I just saw it and I thought, oh, that's cool, and it sounds cool. I didn't want to do what everyone else did, which was like trumpet or trombone. I would have liked one of those, but I was like, nah, because everyone's doing it. So no one's doing this one, which was the clarinet. And I thought the clarinet was cool. I think it's pretty cool now. But I did the clarinet, and right away I realized that most of all the other boys, other kids, perceived clarinet as a girl's instrument. Maybe there's still some of that today. But yeah, I just quickly became convinced that, oh, the clarinet's really girly and it's kind of lame. And I liked how it sounded, but still, like, it's just kind of a girly instrument. So that was how insecure I was as a kid. They convinced me that, oh, it's a girl's instrument. So I didn't like it. I didn't practice it. I just didn't really want to do it, anything to do with it anymore, until we moved. So we moved, and then I didn't have to play it. Until 6th grade, I went to a new school, and this will tell you something about the school systems in the Midwest. At that time, I lived in Iowa versus Utah. They start forcing you to pick an area of music in Utah at like 6th grade, because I didn't have to before then. So 6th grade, I was at a school that was a charter school. It was fairly strict, and with uniforms and everything. And they said, okay, either band or choir. They didn't have orchestra at that point, so band or choir. So I thought, oh, well, I'll do band. This is my chance for redemption. You know, I'm not going to play a girly instrument anymore. So I went, and I believe it was the trumpet. I was like, okay, whatever, I'll play the trumpet. Everyone is, but I like it. And that's definitely, you know, that can be a boy instrument. So I chose the trumpet. We hadn't bought it yet. We were ordering it or something, and the teacher was unclear, with not just me, but with multiple other students, about when the due date, the deadline was for having that instrument brought to class and ready to go. And so we missed it. I wasn't ready. I didn't have it on the day, along with a few other students. And the teacher, he was just a real jerk to kids. He was really conceited and really rude. Hopefully he's different now. He is a fantastic artist, instrumentalist. He played in the Mormon Tabernacle Choir on and off. So, or not the choir, the orchestra at Temple Square, not the choir. But so he was a phenomenal teacher, artist, everything. But he was a jerk to kids. I don't know what it was with 6th graders. But anyway, that day he chewed us out like hardcore, yelled at us in front of the class, shamed us, embarrassed us, and I was just pissed off. That I hated that. I was so mad. And he was ranting and raving, and it got to a point where he said something like, well, if you really want to be in this class, then you'll bring your instrument and this and that. And I said, you know what? I don't want to be in this class. I don't want to be here with you. I don't want anything to do with band. I don't want to do any of this. And he said, all right, then, why don't you go to a different class? Go ahead and leave. So that was the first time I'd really rebelled against someone at school. But I was so mad that he was treating us this way, not just me, but a few other kids. And so I kind of fired back at him. He fired back and sent me out. And I think he thought that I would come crawling back, because at this point of the school is a new school. No one was in choir. No one liked it. No one. Choir's girly for 6th grade boys anyway. I think it's girly. But no one wanted to be in it anyway. It was small, and yeah, it was just a tiny choir. So I'm pretty sure he thought I would come crawling back because everyone wanted to do band. But I didn't. I was like, okay, well, I will leave. So I left the class, walked down the hall, mad, angry, and just real defiant, feeling like I'd done something awesome. But as I walked down the hall, I had the same thought process. I thought, well, what the heck what am I gonna do now? And I looked over. There's the choir room, and I looked in, and it's all girls. It's a tiny choir, 9 girls. So that'd be 10 of us, me the only boy. And I wasn't liking that. That's not what I wanted. That's not. But I was so prideful I could not go back to band. I couldn't go back and submit to him and show that, yeah, that I really wanted to be there. So I didn't. I went to choir, even though at first I hated it. But I quickly learned to love it, just because I love choir, and I love vocal harmony and just the mixture of voices, especially in a choral setting and classical music. And I love choir, and I just took it with a lot of enthusiasm. I wasn't great with the ladies, even though I was surrounded by 9 of them, but I did like choir. And we made it cool, we made it awesome. And so by halfway through the next year, 7th grade, we had half of the band kids over in choir, because it was a combination of that teacher being such a jerk and us making choir so awesome and such a fun part to be with, that we had plenty of kids that were band kids that we brought on over to choir, just because it was such a good time. And so I think that's where my love of music started, where I realized it, actually, and that started my participation in choir. I've been in choirs ever since. There was one year I didn't do it, 10th grade, because there wasn't really one that I could participate in. But other than that, I've been in audition choirs. I had a chance to be at every year in choir for the state of Utah. They have something called All-State, which is like an All-State wrestler, All-State football player, but this is All-State choir members. So you get in a big choir, you rehearse for 3 or 4 days for several hours a day, and then you do an awesome concert. We performed at the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, and my sister as well. My 2 sisters are also really into choir. So it's become something we loved. Music and choir, especially for me, they're a big way that I de-stress, and yeah, it's just one of those things that makes life really beautiful, and for me, a great way to kind of soothe whatever emotional problem thing I'm going through. It just helps to get it out through the power of beautiful music. So I'm glad that I had that jerk of a teacher and that I had that experience, because if not, I would have been in band. I didn't really like band. I don't love it till this day, and I probably wouldn't have fallen in love with music or had the great experiences that I've had with it had I stayed in choir. So I told you about the first time I kind of snapped back rebelled a little bit against an authority at school, my mean band teacher. So in that same school, a couple years later, in 9th grade, I actually was suspended from school, which for me was just terrible, because I go to school at BYU, which means that you have fairly good grades, and hopefully you've been, well, okay, I was known as like a good student and well-behaved. I actually wasn't well-behaved, but I was really good at creating the perception that I was a really good student. So when I would misbehave, I was an expert at pushing teachers just towards the line where it really annoyed them, but not enough to do anything or become really upset because of the good grades that I had and how much it helped the class. And that's not a good thing, not bragging. I feel really bad about it now. But, but I was an expert at pushing teachers right to the edge, but not getting in trouble for it like many of the other kids would. And so I actually became a bit of kind of a leader of the group, of a little pack of kids that would misbehave and just do terrible things that I feel bad about now. But one thing was there was a kid that I'm good friends with now, but we didn't get along then, mainly because at that age, it was like 7th, 8th, 9th grade, so everyone's insecure and childish. But he would try and pick on me, kind of like I tried to pick on other kids. But he would try and pick on me and my friends who happened to be just smaller kids who couldn't like defend themselves as well. He was a big kid. And so, yeah, we would have conflicts. It wasn't anything new by the time this happened. So we would get into little fights and stuff a lot. But anyway, so I prided myself actually in being able to push teachers toward the edge, do things that I probably shouldn't, that I definitely shouldn't have, but not get in any trouble for it. I never did. Until one day, this kid picked on one of my friends who was just smaller at that age, right in the middle of class, in the middle of a computer lab that we were in. And I snapped back at him and said, "Hey, why don't you like leave him alone? Pick on someone your own size. Why are you picking on such a little kid? You're huge, you know." And so we were kind of talking back and forth. We both stood up, and he got me, pushed me to the ground. We definitely didn't fight or anything. He just kind of pushed me down. But the whole time I was looking over at the teacher and how I didn't want him to see us and get us in trouble. So I'm kind of focused on the teacher and not getting caught or getting in trouble. And that's when he pushed me down. Well, as soon as he pushed me down on the floor, the teacher saw and kind of told us. He didn't yell at anything. He just, hey, what's going on, and sent us back to our seats. And he acted like that was going to be the end of it. He said he wouldn't report or anything. He totally did, because a few hours later in the day, we both get called to the office and told that we're going to be suspended, that we're suspended for 3 days or 4 each for fighting in class. And we didn't even fight. There was no fight. I was looking, and he pushed me to the ground. We had fought before that, but on this occasion we didn't fight. And I think the reason we got suspended is because they had a bit of a hunch of my mischief and misgivings, and the other kid too. Like, they knew, but they never had any evidence. They could never do anything. And these were minor things. We weren't bad kids. We weren't smoking or drinking or nothing like that. Just mischief, middle school mischief. But yeah, so I feel like they had wanted to punish me and us for some time, but never had any evidence, any way or reason to, and so they took advantage of it then. But I was very mad. Now that kind of makes sense, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of deserving. But in ninth grade mind, I was so mad that I was being suspended for something that we didn't do, that nothing happened. We did not fight on that occasion. We did fight before and after, but we didn't fight. And so it just made me beyond mad that we got suspended for not fighting. And we were both very, very angry about it. I was scared to death. I thought that was going to ruin my academic record, and keep me from going to college, keep me from getting a good job, keep me from succeeding, advancing in life. I was terrified. I thought that was the end for me, but I learned that that's not the case. It's not true. In fact, the college has never learned about it. It was a 9th grade suspension. But yeah, on my record, I have a suspension for fighting, even though we didn't fight then. And it was funny because that kid actually was in my ward at the time that it happened. Or no, he had been. We had lived in the same ward before, so this conflict had been going on for a while. But we had lived in the same ward before, and our parents are good friends. They're close, and they were still close at that time. So it was really embarrassing because they decided to get everyone together and talk about it, and and just have a kind of a diplomatic 9th grade discussion about what had happened. And we said what we had to say and whatever, but we weren't over it. We weren't having it. I just thought it was really annoying because they made us get together and talk about it as a group and leave as friends and all of that, and we weren't friends. And that kid went to another school the next year, not because of that, but he just went to another school. I didn't see him really until after both of us had finished high school and served missions, and we're cool and we're friends now. I actually like him. I think he's really funny. But yeah, that was getting suspended for not fighting, even though we did fight and we did do plenty of other things that could have merited us discipline from the school. But yeah, somewhere there on my record, I was suspended in school for fighting. So I served my mission in Mexico. The mission is called Mexico Aguascalientes. Aguascalientes is one of the states that I served in central Mexico. And there's 2 other states, Zacatecas and San Luis Potosí. And I like to call Aguascalientes, or that area that I served in, kind of like the Kansas of Mexico. That's what it would be, because it's right in the middle, and it's centralized, and it's really agricultural, and nothing crazy there happens. It's just super chill. I've actually lived in Kansas City now, and I know that's not the case all the time. But Kansas in general, super chill, relaxed, nothing happens. That was the same with central Mexico. A lot of people think that Mexico is a super dangerous place, or that it's like third world poor and all those stuff. That's actually not true. That was kind of my impression before. I was excited to go somewhere that was really dangerous, and that I'd have a lot of fun being around dangerous things and stuff. It wasn't the case. Most of Mexico isn't that way. It's just certain parts. So in the very north, very south, and some other places, there's real extreme poverty or really extreme gang violence and stuff. But a lot of it isn't that way. So that was my mission. It definitely wasn't anything crazy. But yeah, my first night in Mexico, we traveled from the MTC in Utah to Dallas, and then from Dallas, Texas, to the mission in central Mexico, a tiny little airport. And we got together, met the presidents, went with our companionships and everything. And I went with my companion and several other companionships of missionaries to this house that we were going to stay in. And there was like 8 or 10 of us in the house. So it seemed like there were more of us than there should be or normally were. And the place that we got to sleep was on the floor. And then the floor, in Mexico, the floors are usually concrete, like they're not finished. Sometimes they have tile on them, but like a lot of the cases, it's just concrete floor. Definitely not a lot of carpet in Mexico. I never stepped on carpet in Mexico. But in that case, that house was just a cement floor, and that was where we slept. We didn't have a blanket. They kind of gave us like a sheet or a towel or something for each of us. And of course, I didn't understand anything like that people were saying, so I didn't know what was really going on. But I kind of had to accept in my head. I'm like, okay, well, I guess this is what it'll be. I kind of had to go through a process like, okay, I guess this is what living, this is what I'm going to get used to, and this is what it'll be, and I'll have to get used to and enjoy this. But thankfully it wasn't. That was just, that night was a total anomaly. There were too many missionaries in one part of the area, and so we had to stay the night, and they just didn't have any place to put us. So we ended up on the floor, a couple of their missionaries. I woke up to someone in the bathroom showering, and just water seeping out onto the floor and stuff. But again, that night, that whole situation, total anomaly. They have showers, they have good houses and floors and everything in Mexico. It's just that night that there were way too many missionaries in the same house out of necessity. And yeah, later we went to our apartment. We had beds. We had bathrooms, we had a whole house to ourselves and everything. But I was interesting because I kind of had to go through, I had to kind of accept that was maybe what Mexico was going to be like, and I accepted it. It was going to be rough, but I was like, okay, well, I'll do this, I'll serve, and I would have been, I don't know that I've been happy to do it, but I was prepared to do it with a good attitude. I'm glad it didn't work out that way. I'm glad we had beds and houses and everything, but that was interesting. It surprised me a lot that night, and I thought that maybe that was a reflection of how the rest of my time in Mexico would be. So the one exception to what I described earlier about Mexico being in a lot of cases very peaceful and uneventful as far as violence or turmoil or poverty goes, the one exception to that I experienced was about halfway through the mission for me. We were in a tiny town, a very small town, so a tight-knit little community in a state, but this town was several hours, like 2 or 3 hours in bus, which is what most people used, 2 to 3 hours from all the other places in the mission. So we were a little, we had a bit of distance between us. And that cut us off from a lot of what was going on. But it was fun in that little town, and we worked hard and had a good time. At one point, though, one day we walked out of a lesson or wherever we were, and there was crazy stuff going on in the streets. It looked like there were like military or like state police kind of thing out there with military rifles and things set up in the city square, and just really bizarre, really tense. In Mexico, they do just have like state police, federal police rolling through town with big old, automatic kind of machine gun type weapons on the back of the truck. It's kind of in the area where I was, I guess there used to have been a ton of gang violence and the things we described, but it was cut down. A lot of the reason why was because of that kind of law and order that they instilled with a lot of strong police presence. But yeah, so that was normal to see them rolling around, but not normal to see them with the rifles and military rifles set up like they were ready for an attack or something. And I think the measures they were taking were just being very proactive and careful. Turned out, we heard in the news there had been a band of like the gangsters that we talk about, narcos, narcotic drug traffickers, human traffickers, that have a lot of problems in the north with, that were passing through somewhere near our region. They didn't really come through, I don't think, maybe a tiny bit, but they were just being really preemptive, really proactive about avoiding any problems. But that was kind of interesting, kind of scary. And later that night or the next day, sometime around when when that group of people was said to be passing through. We ran into someone on the street. We were talking with one guy who we talked to him, but we realized that he wasn't really in a good state of mind. He was kind of a little drunk and stuff, and so we were just ending our conversation with him. This other guy comes over, and he did look like a gangster, and pretty dangerous. Just the way he probably had like tattoos up here that mean certain things, that he's done certain things, killed certain people, and just other ways you can tell that he was probably involved in some shady bad stuff. But so I think he really was a gangster. Good thing was he was totally drunk too, like he was out of it. But he came over, and I started talking with him just to say, hey, how's it going? We're just leaving. We got to head out of here, because he kind of approached us, and he stopped talking to me. I was talking with the other person, but he started talking with my companion, and I was ending my conversation. As I kind of turned over and looked over, I heard him say to my companion, like, hey, I guess he was a little upset that we weren't taking him seriously because he was really drunk and things, that we were kind of on our way out. He was kind of bothered by that, and he said to my companion, hey, how much do you think I can get for those pretty blue eyes your boyfriend there's got? I guess think we're boyfriend or whatever, but like, hey, how much do you think I can get for those pretty blue eyes on the market, on the black market? But he said that like straight up. Like, I have no doubt that he had dealings in the market before, and that the trafficking of humans and of human organs and that stuff that happens here in the U.S., it definitely happens in Mexico in parts. And he said it straight up. He's like, hey, and he was really mad at us for whatever reason. And he said, after that, he said something like, if I see you again, like if I see you in this part of town or I see you around here at all, I'm taking that güero, that gringo, that white person. Like I'm gonna take. We're gonna mess him up. We're gonna mess up both of you. My companion was American as well. Well, his parents are El Salvadorian, and so he has darker skin like a lot of people in Mexico, and so he kind of fit in better than I did, but aesthetically, not necessarily culturally. But so yeah, he said that, and he said, we're gonna take you both out. Like we're gonna mess you up. And I was a little bit, I definitely felt like we should leave, but I wasn't super scared by that because he was really drunk and high, so I wasn't super concerned about I thought that he probably, when he came to, he wouldn't even remember having seen us or having said anything like that. So I wasn't super concerned about it. Definitely thought we should leave, though. We did leave. My companion was just terrified and mortified the rest of that night and the next 2 or 3 days. He legit, I love the guy, no offense to him, and he was probably just really concerned about my safety, his safety. So, I mean, I have the most respect for him. But I thought, to me, it was kind of strange, but I understand his terror now. But he did not want to really leave the house. He didn't know what we should do, but he was just terrified that if we were in that area or anywhere in town, that guy or his associate, people he dealt with, hung with, would like mess with us and do us wrong, do us harm. And so it was kind of funny to me then. It's not really funny now, but it was kind of funny. I'm like, dude, what is the problem? We're missionaries. We're doing God's work. Gangsters never really mess with missionaries, religious groups, people, just because it's not good. It's just kind of, they'll mess with other people, but you don't mess with people who are doing kind of God's work anywhere. Like in America, you wouldn't mess with a monk or something. You just wouldn't, a priestess, a nun, you wouldn't like hurt them. No one would. So same sort of dynamic there, but he was just terrified by it and really looking out for our safety. So we called the mission president, told him what had happened, and he asked us if we were doing what we should have, we were being obedient, and we said yes. We're doing our best, we're trying, and he said, then go ahead and go work and just do your best and things will be fine. If you really feel like you're in danger, then call your leaders, call me. So we were fine. We eventually we got back to normalcy and back to working and everything. But yeah, that was something I don't think it was a big deal because the guy was just out of it. He was kind of just reflexively angry because of his altered state. But yeah, that's the only thing dangerous that happened. I don't think it was very dangerous, but that did happen. And that's about as dangerous as it got for me in Mexico. Really, other than that, it was just wonderful, peaceful, wonderful, lovely people. Never had any problems. Mexico in that part of the country generally just doesn't have any problems with really extreme like gang violence or drug, human trafficking, that kind of stuff. But that was an experience that was a little bit of an exception. So I'll just tell you a little bit about what the food is like in Mexico, at least my part of Mexico, in the middle and the center. When people think of Mexican food here in the States, they think of, I guess, places like Cafe Rio or Costa Vida. They know that it's Americanized, but still, like, the Mexican food they eat, even authentic Mexico, is more of what you'd find in northern Mexico and the south of the United States. So sometimes it's called Tex-Mex, but it's kind of a combination. Like, they have certain foods and dishes in northern Mexico that the U.S. has kind of adopted, and the main thing they do is just make it a ton bigger, unnecessarily big, and that's what we like about it, and excessive. But in central Mexico, though, I never ate a burrito or a smothered burrito, anything like that. They have burritos, I had them like twice, but they're these tiny little, they're essentially like a taquito or something. They have beans, rice, whatever in them, meat, but they're rolled up and they're just small, so they're not what you'd think of as a burrito at all. But yeah, I never had anything what we would call a burrito, but we had tons of tacos, obviously. But again, that's not, we think, like, I guess outside of the U.S., people think that Americans eat pizza and you know, hamburgers and French fries every night, and maybe some of us do, but that really isn't like characteristic of what most people eat, I feel like. Same thing in Mexico. They don't just eat tacos all the time. Tacos are kind of like, it's like, oh, let's go out for tacos. Kind of like we go out for stuff. Let's go out for tacos, or it's a special occasion, we'll have some delicious tacos. So they don't just eat tacos all the time. The area that I lived, we ate a lot of tons of rice, not a ton of beans actually, just tons of rice with things like chicken. They what we would call, like you get at the store, the rotisserie chicken, kind of like that, but just roasted in a different way. So they eat a lot of like roasted, flame-fired roasted chicken. And yes, special like meats, really nicer meats like carne asada and stuff like that. That's for more special occasions. More than anything, or kind of more special dinner. So, but one things that the Mexicans that I interacted with do very well is they can turn something very simple, like, oh, we're having rice and potatoes or something, or chicken, rice and chicken. They can turn a really simple meal into something incredibly flavorful through the salsas that they make. There's an endless variety of salsas and kinds that you can make, and that's kind of where you show what you're worth as far as Mexican cuisine is. It's what kind of salsa, how good of a salsa you can make to accompany the meal. And that's what makes the meal. Like the meal, it can be rice and some chicken, but it can be a totally different experience with an amazing salsa. So there's a lot of attention paid to and pride in the detail of the food that they make, and like the garnishes and stuff like that. And that's something I feel like we don't have, at least universally here in the United States. We don't see a lot of that. I feel like, and I always felt this way, because one of my parents, my mother, is half Mexican, and we tend to eat more flavorful food like I'm describing. I feel like we eat really boring, bland, plain food in the U.S. for the most part. I don't generally, because I've been taught how to, and I seek for really good, flavorful food. But I feel like a lot of us, and me a lot of the time, we eat really bland food. Just by default. I don't know. That's one thing our culture hasn't paid a lot of attention to, is cooking. But yeah, that's one thing about Mexico that is a lot of fun. Every meal is different, even if it's the same thing kind of thing. They also eat a lot of pasta, which I had no idea. If you go to Mexico, you might get served a plate of spaghetti, so spaghetti noodles. But the sauce, the red sauce, marinara that we put on it, or I was used to from Italy, I guess, it's a very American thing. Never had that once. It's spaghetti noodles, but you'll be like, oh, that's spaghetti, but it's green, or it's kind of yellow or orange, or it's white or red. And that's because they put they make sauces, kind of cream sauces out of different things. So like if it's green, it could be tomatillos and basil, some other things. So they get really creative and flavorful with the pasta, with the spaghetti. But just know if you ever go to Mexico and you serve spaghetti, it's not what you're going to expect. It's very different. It's very good, but it kind of took me by surprise a lot. The first time I ate each kind, that it wasn't anything like, you know, it wasn't red spaghetti with meatballs, nothing like that. But they use spaghetti noodles, so, and it's very good. And yeah, they also eat a lot of what they call pollo empanizado or bistec empanizado, which is chicken or steak, but kind of breaded. But again, they just do it more carefully, and I feel like more with more attention to detail. It changes things. It's not just like a really basic breaded, like breading on the outside. They do a lot of things to make it a really kind of fancy meal. So what I like about Mexican cuisine is they can do a lot with what you could consider very little, and make just amazing flavorful food. And I wasn't even in the most flavorful parts of Mexico. There's parts in southern and northern that are known for their cuisine and just phenomenal food, much more than in my area of the country. So it was a lot of fun in that area. So I talked earlier about language, how I love language and nuance in language and the differences between language. I like learning about it. One thing that was interesting about in Mexico, I learned that learning another language, of course we know that there's different dialects within regions of the country or different versions of language. Spanish that we know as Spanish is actually called Castellano, and that's like a region of Spain that specific dialect of Spanish comes from. And so just learning about that and meeting lots of different people, even though I served in 3 states, I met people from all over the country, and I actually know about most parts of the country at least a little bit, and what people are like and how they sound. And you learn that there's a lot of differences between states, but even regions within the same states. I imagine it's something very similar. In fact, I know it's very similar to what we have in the U.S. and probably all places, but it was more evident to me because I was learning a new language, and each time it was different. One thing that helped me to really, personally, that helped me to connect with the people and kind of the country or the area that I was serving in and working in was being able to speak almost exactly the way that people around me spoke. And when I say that, like, a lot of missionaries who learn another language can become proficient and understandable or even good. Like, they can have an accent that sounds Spanish or French or Italian in general. But you can still tell that it's, you know, that it's someone someone who speaks a different language speaking that language. And you can get to points where you're better at masking that and you sound more natural and everything. But there's a difference between that and sounding almost exactly like the way people talk in a certain region. And so I can't say that I was a bomb missionary in everything else that I did, but in that area I was really blessed. I picked up the language really quickly. I was blessed to pick it up very quickly, and that was one area that I just did well in. And what I did because I realized that I had strong ability in the language, probably because it's pretty easy, easier than most languages. Because I realized I had ability, I decided to really closely mimic, kind of pay attention to what other people were doing and saying, the way they said it, and mimic it the best I could out of kind of a desire to be like them, to connect with them. And it sounds strange, it really did a lot. It made a huge difference for me. I felt like I connected a lot better with people, and people would be surprised because they'd see someone who's very white like me, and I would speak to them in Spanish without much of an accent at all, but sounding very like the way they spoke. I mean, like the local vocabulary, kind of jargon, even the cadence that they used within from city to city, from state to state. You can kind of get a feel for the expressions that they use or the cadence that they speak in or the slang. And I was able to mirror and match that fairly well. really well, and it surprised people a lot, but it really helped to build connections between me and our companionship, the church, and people in the community, just because it would kind of blow their minds. So I feel really blessed that God would give me that ability to connect with people in that way, because I don't have like a ton of other ones, but that was something that I did advance fairly well in, and I felt like it opened up a lot of opportunities for us. And for me, it helped me a lot with feeling that I was doing something good, that I was serving others, that I made people feel comfortable. I could kind of speak to them in their own language, exactly in their own language. That was something that made me feel really good about myself and the work that I was doing, and was just a good part of the missionary experience. So I missed that because it goes away a little. I still can speak with a fairly good accent, but the nuance, the minor differences, subtle differences between region to region, and the cadence and everything, they go away after a while if you're not around them and practicing. But that was one part of my mission that I really treasured, that I'm glad that I was given that ability and the chance to do that. So most of my time as a missionary, we would meet people either as referrals from friends and church members that we knew and worked with, or we'd meet them personally. Like we didn't knock on doors because the church has kind of moved away from that, and especially at that time in New Mexico. But we did talk with people all over the place. So in buses, on the sidewalk, on the street, just wherever we could find people, we'd meet them, introduce ourselves, and share messages of the gospel of Jesus Christ with them. And so usually that happened fairly naturally. We'd meet someone, and if they were interested, we would come on over and start teaching them lessons of the gospel, and hopefully get people to a point where they can ask God if the gospel is true or not, and decide to join the church and live the gospel. Usually that happened fairly naturally. There was one big exception to that happened. One amazing person that we met changed my mission and my life. But we met her in a really bizarre way. My companion and I were walking, and this was, like I said, Mexico for the most part is fairly nice. But this was kind of a more shady part of town, not super bad, but it was a little more run down kind of thing. And we were walking through town, and we saw a couple of women, kind of middle-aged women, out in the street fighting. Not fist fighting, not physically, but having a very strong argument. And I don't know what it was about or anything, but it was very clear that it was very emotionally charged and very tense, and they were having a real good argument between themselves. And so we're walking down the street, and we're kind of avoiding that. We're like, oh, well, hope everything works out. And as we were walking away, the thought came to me, oh, you need to go talk to them. You should go talk to them. And I thought, well, that's crazy. So, whatever. I looked at my companion, and he was looking at me, and he had the same thought process. So it was kind of cool to see that, oh, we're on the same page, like the Spirit whispered to both of us that we should go talk to him. But at the same time, terrified, because who does that? You don't interrupt people who are in a conversation usually with other people. Definitely not if they're having, a very spirited, probably very important argument like they were. They were having a real good argument. And so it would have been bizarre here or there, wherever, to just interrupt people who were, having a very important, spirited discussion like they were fight. But we looked at each other and we decided to do it. So we walked up, and just as awkwardly as you might imagine, we said, "Hey, how are you doing?" And they're looking at us like, "What are you? Who are you? What are you doing?" We're talking here. We're in the middle of something. We said, "Hey, by the way, we're missionaries from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints," and just started to introduce ourselves. And they're just taken aback, looking at us like, "What are you? What is going on?" And it'd be cool to say that their hearts were softened, and we decided to meet with both people and taught them the gospel and all that. No, what happened was one of the women said something to the effect of, "You know what? Whatever. We'll talk later. I gotta go." So she took off, and we're just talking with the other woman who stayed there, but she's not there mentally. She's distracted, probably thinking about the fight that she was just barely having and why she's talking to us, to Americans. And so she was just kind of out of it, but we ended up saying, hey, we can come by sometime and share messages that we share. And we got her address. She pointed out to the house where she lived. And so we said, okay, we'll come back another time and we'll do that. And we tried to go back. It was so awkward, so weird, really uncomfortable for everyone, I think. But we went back, and she wasn't there. And then we went back a couple times throughout the next few days or week, and it became very clear that she was avoiding us. And usually when you do that, usually when that happens, you just kind of move on, because why keep searching after someone who's not, wanting to see or meet with you? But in her case, we felt like we should keep passing by and just see if we could find her for whatever reason. And we did one day. We found her. we talked to one of her children, and she said, "Is your mom here?" She said, "Oh yeah, she's here." And so she came out, again, not looking super happy to see us, but it was pouring rain. And that's the only time rain ever helped me in the mission. The other times, it was awful. Everyone talks about stories of how the rain helped them, or, it helped the situations they were working and teaching in, not for us. But that time, it was pouring rain, and she kind of looked at it and she said, "All right, well, come on in and share me your message." Kind of like to get it over with, and let's end this. But we taught her the first message, and she was pretty closed for the most part. She didn't open up a ton. But it was clear by the end of the lesson, we're telling her about the gospel and Jesus Christ and things like that. And she was genuinely touched. She didn't show it a ton, but you could tell that she was genuinely touched and taken aback. And this was something that she was looking for, something that she needed in her life in a lot of ways. And so she let us come back. And like I said, that first meeting was awkward and kind of closed and that, but she was very interested in learning more. But she almost kind of played it off like we could tell she was interested, but oh no, I'm not, And we thought maybe she'll, maybe she won't let us, maybe she'll blow us off. Maybe when she go back, she won't come to the door. She'll avoid us again, and we'll just have to move on. But when we came back, she had totally read the things that we'd left with her, had done the things that we'd committed her to do, and was very warm and receptive. From that point, she opened up, and we became really, really good friends. And she was a woman who had just gone through a lot of very difficult, painful, terrible things. She was kind of the only person who supported and ran the household. She was single, yet she supported her brother, her children, her nieces and nephews, her father, her elderly father, and any relative, friend that kind of came over and would kind of mooch off of them. So, and she worked crazy long hours, worked really hard to support herself and her family without ever getting ahead, and just a lot of painful issues that she'd gone through and things that had happened. But it amazed me how much we didn't, we taught her the gospel and the messages, and we kind of guided her as she read the scriptures and the Book of Mormon and came to church and everything. It was amazing to me how much it was self-propelled. It was done out of self-will. She was doing it herself. She was kind of going through these steps and these changes on her own almost, only with minimal guidance by us. She almost taught herself the lessons, almost taught herself the gospel, and lived it by her own initiative on her own. And she just blew us away with how receptive and responsive she was to the gospel of Jesus Christ that we were teaching her. And she made just incredibly difficult sacrifices. She made lifestyle changes. One big one was going to church on Sunday and not working. Not that she didn't want to, but she had a crazy job with a crazy, difficult, ridiculous boss who she was kind of a shift manager, shift leader at the factory she worked at, and that was going to be a big problem with her going to church. And she said, "You know what, well, I'm just going to go. I've worked there a long time, I've put in, and I've done my best to train everybody and do everything, and they mistreat me, and I'm just going to go to church. I don't think anything bad is going to happen from it." And we were kind of thinking, man, I hope it doesn't. and it didn't. There were some things that came up, and she was able to resolve them, and it ended up being a lot better. She ended up to where she didn't have to work on Sunday, and she came up with different ways to get the things that her supervisor wanted done completed. And so she was just incredibly resourceful, innovative at solving the problems and making the adjustments and changes so that she could live the gospel of Jesus Christ to the fullest and could join the church and be baptized and just live the gospel in the way it should be. And so it was amazing to me. I don't know that I've seen probably greater sacrifice, greater faith. Certainly I saw many examples like hers, but hers is the one that stands out most to me. And we also had a very close connection, her and I, and our companionship. I just felt like I understood her, where she was coming from, really well, and she appreciated that and understood me very well, the kind of person that I was, and my companion as well. So it was a joy to teach her. It was a joy to see her become such a happier person. When we met her, she, by consequence of the really harsh, difficult environment she was in, she was very jaded, very defensive person, and very unhappy, and sometimes would take that out on other people, had taken that out on other people. But she transformed. It kind of blew her friends away, kind of threw everyone off and threw them for a loop, and was a great opportunity to introduce that gospel to other people because they saw such a drastic change in her. And she's continued. That's the way that she is to this day. And so she continues to be an amazing example to me. Sorry, I didn't name her. This woman was named Elena, Helen in English, Elena. And Elena is just an amazing, special person. Probably the person that I remember, the experience that I remember most was watching her change and watching her do it on her own. We were just kind of there to provide the source material. But she went for it on her own, and that really blew us away. It was special. Towards the very end of my mission, we'd had a lot of great experiences and had been blessed in a lot of ways, changed. We met one lady named Maria. I believe we met her on a bus. Her name was Maria del Carmen or something like that. And she was like 80-something years old, so she was old. And usually, like as a missionary, you don't always necessarily engage in a lot of teaching and discussion, extensive discussion, like or teaching them and helping them live the gospel with people that age for a lot of reasons. One is that you don't know if they're completely there, mentally, just because of age and the factors there, or if they're to a point where they're kind of controlled or monitored very closely by their family, like their children, and maybe those children don't want you to teach them, or just the factors that are a result of that extended age of life. And so she was in her 80s. We met her, we visited her once, and we taught her the gospel, and she was just really receptive to it. And she'd been a Catholic her whole life, so it was kind of surprising. And she wasn't really unhappy as a Catholic, but she just felt like there was so much more, and she'd always felt like there was more to the gospel of Jesus Christ than what she had experienced. And so the whole time we taught her, we were kind of careful and not wanting to, like, we didn't want to feel like we were taking advantage of someone who wasn't all there, or that it was against her wishes or her family's wishes, kind of thing. Someone that was being nice and letting us do our thing, but wasn't really sure or sincere about learning about it. But we quickly learned that it was just the opposite. She was all there mentally. In certain ways we probed and checked, and when we would ask her, okay, well, what do you remember what you taught this? She remembered everything, and she had studied about it and prayed about it and had acted on certain things, and she was all in. And it just blew my mind because she was all there mentally, she was all there emotionally. I can honestly say there was no taking advantage of anyone. She loved the gospel of Jesus Christ that we were teaching her, and it was her choice to live it and to make a change. in her religion, and she came to church several times, super early, and just doing everything the best she could, and made certain changes in her lifestyle. We asked her, hey, you know, you have 10 children. I think she had like 10 children or 12. And I said, you know, really has the potential to cause some conflicts and rifts between you and the children, because you raised them as a Catholic. They've all been Catholic. Everyone's been Catholic forever. How are they going to handle this kind of thing? And she said, well, you know, I'm not really concerned with how they handled it. I know that they love me and I love them, and they may not like it per se, but they'll have to just live with it, because I know that this is true and this is right. And one daughter did end up being a bit opposed to it, but quickly realized that again, like we had, that it wasn't something that she was, I don't know, doing for fun or doing out of boredom or doing because she wasn't mentally there. She was serious about it, and she felt that it was the right way to go. She felt that it was the truth, and she felt so much more fulfilled with the gospel of Jesus Christ. Here as a result is the restoration. And so she made a decision to be baptized in the church and to live the gospel, and it opened up a lot of doors for her family as well. And it was remarkable to me to see that God would preserve someone who lived such a wonderful and good and caring life as a Catholic or a member of a different religion, would preserve them for so long and allow them the chance to learn the gospel and share it with their family, even at that really extended age. I don't know exactly how old she was. She was in her 80s, though. And beyond just mentally there, she was physically there, too. She would tire out. She didn't have a ton of stamina, but she attacked things with a lot of energy. And she just had a lot of fierce old lady energy. Like, she was on top of things, and we'd see her out working in the garden, exercise. I think that's how we met her actually initially, was she was out working, and we said, well, we can help you with that, because we saw this old lady and she's like 88. We didn't want her to topple over, but she was like, all right, and she put us to work, and she kept working herself too. So just someone with incredible drive, passion for life, physically, emotionally, and mentally as well. And it amazed us how much she was able to have her life enriched by the gospel. So I am currently a student at BYU. I'm studying communications, and I'll emphasize in public relations is what I want to do, what I'm going to do. And I feel really confident about that now, and I'm so glad, because for the first almost 2 complete years of college, I had no idea what I was doing as far as like what I wanted to study. I took a lot of generals, and I thought I wanted to do business for a lot of reasons. And I did, I still do, but it'll be my minor. But I took a lot of the business prerequisite courses, like accounting, finance, information systems, and HR, all of those. And each one I found to be fascinating and I really enjoyed, but I never felt like, oh, I want to do this. This is what I see myself working in, anything like that. So I didn't know what I was supposed to feel. I didn't know if there was something I was supposed to do. I still don't know that we're predestined to do anything or anything like that, but I feel like what I'm in now is a really good fit. But I kept moving through each emphasis that I learned about in the business school, even though I hadn't applied to it or anything. And I decided to take Communications 101, which was a class that I had wanted to take actually my first semester of college, because when a representative came to our high school representing BYU and gave us a presentation, I wasn't very impressed with BYU, to be honest, just because I was really rebellious. I thought, oh, I don't really want to go there. But I was impressed with him. I just thought that the way he carried himself and presented and everything was really cool. So I asked him what he studied, and he said communications. And I thought, oh, that's really cool. Makes sense. He's a really good communicator. But what the heck do you do? You know, what kind of a job is there in communications? I was naive. There's tons of work in communications, but I didn't know that. So I thought, oh, well, that's cool, but what kind of an industry is that? So that's kind of the attitude I went with early on. The first semester of college, I thought, I really want to take communications. But again, what kind of job is that going to be? I need to study calculus and econ. And those are the classes I was going to take. So I didn't take it until my second semester of my second year. I took it, and I was disappointed because it was really boring. I felt like it was really boring. It's a 101 class, so it's really broad and generalized, and just I felt really boring. I wasn't enthusiastic about it until about 3/4 of the way through that semester in that class. They had a member of each track within the communications school come and present. So first was one on journalism, had a journalist come in and talk about it. Then they had PR, and then they had advertising. And I thought each one was really cool, and it was between advertising and PR. But as I learned more about advertising and PR, I realized that PR I felt was a much better fit for me, and I would like it better, I'd be better at it. And so I took the intro to PR class, and finally what I've been searching for as far as feeling like this was right, feeling like I belong, this is what I wanted to do and that I'd be good at, it was just nailed it. I just loved the class, and I loved the industry, and I learned more about it, and I was relieved to find out that there is plenty of work in communications and in PR, and that it actually pays well. It's not, I thought, I became comfortable with, okay, well, I love this, so I'll do it, but I thought that I'd be paid like the, like a journalist in the field of journalism. The median, as far as the median income, it can be quite low unless you make it big, kind of thing. It can be fairly low, and in some cases advertising as well. Well, I found out that the median income for PR actually is a good living wage, good living salary, and so I was thrilled, but that was just kind of cherry on top. I wasn't going to do it because of that, but I was thrilled to find that out. And I do it now because I've always loved connecting and working with people, and I've always loved to be an instrument of persuasion. I work in sales. I've done a couple things in sales, and just in general, I talked about debating and things earlier. I love being able to influence people, to persuade them what I feel and think is best, or persuade on that behalf of someone else what they think or feel is best. And also there's a very fun strategic aspect to public relations where you're helping a company or you're helping a person thinking about things strategically and clearly, anticipating the self-interests and anticipating the responses, the reactions of other people, a wide variety of different people in any situation. And so it's a lot of fun for me to be involved in that. I'm heavily involved in the clubs that are conducive to a career in PR, in communication, and I'll be applying to the school. So I'm hoping I get in. Very happy to have found the field, and even if I don't get into this program, I'll definitely study it somewhere else and work in communications, and I'm glad I found it. I feel a lot better, even though it's overwhelming like it was before. Now it's overwhelming in the sense of, oh, I have too much to do, as opposed to, I don't know what to do. That's a worse kind of overwhelming. So to anyone who's thinking about what they want to do, or unsure or distressed about not knowing where they want to go in their education or in life, I'd just say chill out, have a little patience, explore a lot. And that's the same things everyone told me, but it's hard to. It's hard to relax and chill when you don't know what you want to do. But it would have been helpful to kind of listen to my gut, I guess, or my intuition, or whatever told me to study that initially. Probably would have changed things a lot. I would have discovered communications a lot easier. So if you have something that you feel, that you really feel like you'd like, or that you'd be passionate about, but you have reservations, go ahead and try it. You don't lose anything in trying it. And it might be just what you're looking for. And what you're looking for, as far as we know, changes a lot in a person's life as well, and their career. So I don't know that this will always be the case. For now, though, it's definitely what I want to do. And so I'm glad that I was able to find it, even though I pushed it off and disregarded it for a long time. But I'm very happy where I am and where I'm going. So to anyone who's in the throes of not knowing what they want to do, I'd say relax a little bit. Look into that one thing that's been on your mind that you haven't probably had the courage to take seriously, or just be patient. And when you do find what you want, it'll feel so much better, and just a lot more comfortable and confident. So that's what I would say.